It happened again. Another front-running team denied Nico Hulkenberg. And we found this out on his birthday, no less. Yeah, he was that close to Red Bull until Checo stole the show at Sakir. To Perez fans, no shade at Checo is aimed here. His 2020 win was absolute cinema, especially after Stroll thanked him by firing him. So yeah, don't get me wrong, I'm absolutely looking forward to Checo making a comeback with Cadillac. It's almost a certainty by now, and I really am excited for that. But for today, I wish to chew over the news that we found out just yesterday, last night even, that the new co-director of Red Bull Racing, Dr. Marko, yes, he has actually gotten a promotion, so he's even more ensconced within the Red Bull organization. And no, this is not speculation. This is not something Ralf Schumacher said one day. This comes straight from the doctor's mouth. And the ironic thing about all of this is that Nico was able to impress Red Bull also in a pink Mercedes, which is exactly what Sergio Perez was able to do. But as will become clear in this video, timing was not one of Nico Hulkenberg's bedfellows. In fact, it could be easily his greatest enemy. Because come on, subbing in at Silverstone right at the last minute due to the Rona and sticking it on the second row? That's a really big deal there. So here are the doctor's comments for your consideration. Just that means we can get it out of the way relatively early. Ahem. At that time, Hulkenberg was, I think, a co-commentator at ServusTV. I checked, by the way, on Google. He was. So there was already a relationship there. And there were the beginnings of talks. But then Perez won that race in Bahrain, I think. He did, by the way. And because of that, everything turned in Perez's direction. I think it would have been a really nice time, because the two get along very well, and yes, Hulkenberg is a safe bank for points, and in our car, it would have also been top positions. Now, you might be wondering why I'm so hung up about the fact that Nico didn't really get a chance with the front-running team. You might be especially wondering this if you're new to Formula 1, having just picked it up in the last couple of years, and not really gotten the full context of Nico Hulkenberg's adventure in the sport. By the way, if you are new to Formula 1, welcome. I hope you're enjoying your stay within this sport, and if you like what I have to say, give it a like, maybe a subscribe if you want to learn more about Formula 1 in a friendly, ladder-shaped environment. But this is just yet another example, the third one, yet another front-running team looking at Nico going, you're pretty good. But if only you came about just a week or so earlier, we might have gotten you. Always the bridesman, but never the bride. Either a team manages to find somebody who's just even better than Nico, because let's be real, he's one of the best drivers within the midfield, or, simply put, the team just doesn't want to take the risk and instead they play it safe with somebody they already know. And only now, in his late 30s, has he gotten the chance to be able to be right up there with the front-running teams and be on the podium. Hopefully, he'll at least get a couple of more before he ultimately does retire. And let's not forget his time at Renault. From 2017 through 19, Hulk was supposed to lead their resurgence, but instead, he carried a car that was just never quite ready. His cruelest blow? Hockenheim 2019, his home race. In front of those fans, he slid into the barriers from a podium position, and that single moment summed up his career. Always close, but fate snatched it away. Now, I'll talk more about those Ferrari, Mercedes opportunities later in the video, so if you do keep watching, I think you'll like what I have to say. But I really want to dig a little deeper into Helmut Marko's comments. And that link with ServusTV that Helmut Marko touched upon was a very big indicator about how close things might have gotten. Perhaps maybe the closest that Nico ever got to being with a front-running team. Because ServusTV is very much within the Red Bull ecosphere, and Helmut Marko is a regular guest, and I'm pretty sure he would have known all of the higher-ups within that organisation, including signing on Nico Hulkenberg as a pundit for 2020 since, well, he wasn't having any regular work after Esteban Ocon replaced him at Renault. And maybe, with him being on the inside, they might have chatted every now and again, especially when they were doing interviews, and therefore they might have built up a little bit of a rapport. Helmut getting to knowing the driver, other than just seeing the results. And that maybe, in turn, gives us a little bit more insight into the decision-making of Helmut Marko, that familiarity can open the door for the Austrian, that if you get to know him, he might consider you a little bit. So, if you keep him at arm's length, you are not likely to get anywhere near him in terms of, good favour. And that, quite frankly, the Doctor is very much ensconced within recency bias because, well, he made it quite clear in his comments that it was Checo's win at Sakir that firmly decided that things were going to happen with the Mexican. The spontaneity of this decision was so apparent that one of the announcement photographs for the deal was Horner and Perez in a hotel room, the curtains being identified as a hotel around the Abu Dhabi Yas Marina circuit. It was that last minute, people. Had that race not happened the way it did, and Perez didn't have that burn from the stern, it might have been Nico in that hotel room. Without the context of that being a deal for a race seat, Nico and Red Bull reps in a hotel room. Yeah, context, people. Because, yeah, Perez's efforts did supersede the efforts of Nico in the pink Mercedes at the British Grand Prix that year. Considering that he literally had to jump in at a moment's notice after months on the sidelines, that should have been a Herculean effort, but no. It did reinforce his reputation as a driver you could depend on, even with no preparation. But Marko stopped short of promising wins, though. I think that is a deliberate comment, because if that had been the case, then that might have then stirred up considerations that maybe Nico Hulkenberg could have brought the fight to Max Verstappen and even taken away big points from the Dutchman, or taken away a couple of victories here or there. No, that would have been a bridge too far, given the political sensitivities at the time with the Verstappen camp and the beginnings of their relationship with Honda. They were not world champions at that point, so therefore they were still getting their feelers out there, and the RB16 proved to be just that little bit skittish. Not championship material, but it was certainly getting there, especially toward the end of the year. But that being said, with Nico there, he might have been able to procure some big points in 2021 perhaps, to a similar degree as Sergio Perez, or maybe slightly better. But to counter that, and to provide Sergio some good kudos, that burn from the stern campaign at Sakhir, that was incontestable proof that he can perform under colossal pressure, Checo. Coming back from a disastrous start to go on and win your first race, even with the spectre of this being your penultimate race in Formula 1 before Red Bull threw you a lifeline, that is huge. That is a big deal, and that impressed Dr. Marko. I could imagine that they were thinking, wow, if he could win in a Mercedes clone, just imagine what he can do in a Red Bull. Also, I know that many people in the comments will bring this up, but there might have also been money involved. And yeah, I didn't really want to go there. I really wanted to still believe that Formula 1 was a meritocracy, that you had to earn your stripes by getting results, but yeah, money is a factor here, and the riches of Carlos Slim would have certainly been a bit of a calling card and an advantage for Sergio Perez, but I don't want to dwell on that topic anymore. But then Marko also mentioned something really interesting and could have been very important in terms of the synergy with Verstappen and Red Bull, in the fact that Nico and Max are a good interpersonal fit. Marko hinting that Nico and Max get along famously. It certainly helps they both speak Dutch, they both speak German, and that they have shown immense amounts of respect for one another over the years, that they could have easily checked many boxes in terms of team harmony. And also, Nico does not court controversy, except that one time when he told Kevin Magnussen to suck on his you-know-what. Oh god, I made that sound even worse than it actually was. Context! But in all seriousness, there is plenty of evidence to suggest that Max and Nico would have been an incredibly amiable pairing, each of them heaping respect on the other, with the latter reporting that the first person to congratulate him on his podium, once he got out the car, was none other than Max Verstappen. Helps that they were quite good friends in their karting days too, apparently, so there's that connection as well. So if Red Bull were looking for a teammate who could be dependable, consistent, and on great terms with their keystone driver already, Nico would have been a very solid choice. But then again, Marko's comments are not tinged with too much regret. It was more about just hindsight and if only, which do indicate that in terms of general performance and talent, Sergio and Nico probably were, at the time, assessed as pretty much equal. A photo finish of sorts, Checo winning it by a nose. It's plausible that Hulkenberg and Perez could have easily duked it out against one another, potentially in some kind of private test or something, that maybe in terms of outright pace over a single lap, Nico might have had the edge over Checo. And especially in the last few years with qualifying, in the ground effect era, qualifying has become immensely important, especially this year, where a couple of tenths can see you out or in to the next qualifying session. And that was something that Perez really struggled with the current Red Bull cars, and Yuki Tsunoda, and Liam Lawson. So it would have certainly been an uphill battle, and as we've seen with Hulkenberg over at Haas, him putting that car in Q3 more often than it was supposed to, especially in 2023. Whether or not Hulkenberg would have definitely, absolutely 100% guaranteed to have been better than Checo over the course of an entire season, over race distances, that might be something you need to get the foam out for in terms of the foam of doubt. It's a little less clear to prove that Nico would have been better than Sergio over a race distance in that particular car, because we have seen many instances, especially in the first couple of seasons with Red Bull, where on race day, Checo can pull out all the stops, and in his Force India days and the Sauber days, absolute peak legend. Absolutely deserving of being called the Tire Whisperer or the Mexican Minister of Defense, often getting on the podium and you're just thinking, how did he get on the podium? And then just thinking, oh, it's Checo, right. And of course him deserving of his legendary status after Abu Dhabi 2021, him pulling out all the stops to secure Max's first title. And based on various reports from many different pundits and articles and websites, including F1 Unchained's video on the subject, Nico and Max's driving styles aren't all that dissimilar, suggesting that maybe it could have been compatible. And the second seat curse might have been broken, finally, if Nico had a car which he could somewhat work with. They indicate his style as being smooth, adaptable, precise, comfortable with a car that rotates early, and does rely a little bit on oversteer. So it would be safe to say that Hulkenberg could have settled in faster than Perez, but it's a little harder to proclaim whether or not he would have been better over a race distance, because Perez's racecraft does prove to be very crucial in terms of preserving tyres. And those qualities are something that Hulkenberg has demonstrated far less often than Sergio. His first season at Haas failing to soothe the car's unforgiving attitude toward tyres, a trait which Haas thankfully no longer has to deal with. Also, there's no guarantee that Dr. Marko would have been more forgiving toward Nico had things gone astray or gone wrong, or if simply Nico underperformed. So yeah, Nico hasn't had a chance at a top team, but at least we can still say that in this universe, we still have a Hulk within Formula One. He's still here, he's still taking names, he's still scoring points, he's still competitive, and maybe with Audi, he might get a couple of more podiums, or heck, even a cheeky win. And that he could certainly be a really good steady pair of hands in aiding a rookie as he begins his own career, Gabriel Bortoleto. So ultimately, it wasn't a skill issue that denied Nico, it was more to do with timing. It was a last-minute decision to sign on Sergio, one that has ultimately benefited Max Verstappen immensely. But it wasn't the first time that Nico Hulkenberg missed out on a very big break. This is not the first time that fate came a-knocking and gone like, you want it? You want it? You want it? Oh, got ya! Well, I mean, you could argue that getting to represent Audi, a German manufacturer, is a big break in of itself, but what I'm talking about here is historically, getting to drive with a legendary team, or one that was going to become a legend. Ferrari, Mercedes, they were very, very, very interested in Nico. So now we can get back to the stuff I mentioned near the top of the video, because Nico Hulkenberg was this close to Mercedes. I might have mentioned it a couple of times before, but I really need to stress the importance to you that it was so close that he was Mercedes' second choice. Ross Brawn admitting outright after Nico came in as a super sub after Silverstone, if Hamilton hadn't signed for them, Hulkenberg would have partnered Rosberg for sure. The plan to continue the all-German lineup with Hulk replacing Schumacher. But then Lewis signed in late 2012 after having had enough of McLaren, and this is the first of many late calls which denied Nico him going up against a world champion who was available knocking on the door, and you gotta open that door. Yeah, that was absolute rotten luck for Nico, but as we have seen, as history has seen, that was the right call. You can't deny that. Whether or not Nico would have had those titles and instead, well, oh no, wait, no, there would have been two Nicos. Which Nico am I talking about? So after Mercedes slipped away, it looked likely that Nico might have had another chance with another front-running team. In this case, Ferrari. By late 2013, Autosport was reporting that Nico had become a serious candidate to replace Massa. But instead, Ferrari brought back Kimi Raikkonen for a second go-around. Another world champion who had become available. Harsh, considering Hulk was shining at Force India, even winning Le Mans debut with Porsche in 2015. But that success kind of was almost a double-edged sword. It branded Nico as a safe pair of hands, not the star headliner that Ferrari wanted. And then the 2014 rule changes did not help, and then the topic of driver weights became a sore thorn yet again. And Nico Hulkenberg is one of the taller drivers out there, and at the time was one of the heaviest, with Jenson Button and he being the major advocates for rule changes to maybe at least allow the drivers to eat a few more pies. So you could argue that maybe teams were looking at all of the drivers and they were being heightist or something like that. It may not have been the deciding factor that meant Ferrari was not going to sign Nico because he was just too large, but then you've also got to consider why Felipe Massa stuck around for the longest time. Of course, there's a lot of loyalty involved, and he did win a lot of races for Ferrari, but also at that time when weight was really important, Massa was one of the shortest and lightest drivers on the grid, and that was very important since F1 cars with a light driver in it can use ballast to ideally improve the balance if it's fundamentally flawed. You can correct it with weights in certain areas of the car. So he did have his uses, which Hulkenberg would have not been privy to because of his stature. But it's not like Ferrari were just idly thinking about Nico or something like that. They really did consider him. It really probably did go down to the line because there were many paddock rumours at the time that Ferrari got involved and stopped Nico from signing up with Lotus for the final couple of races due to Kimi Raikkonen's relationship with Team Enstone breaking down. It could have been an opportunity for Nico to try his luck with a car that was pretty competitive during that season, or at least at the very beginning, because Kimi won a race. But at the same time, that was probably for the best, because 2014, the Force India car that year, was a stonkingly good one, and the Lotus of that year was not. So if those rumours were true, it could show that Ferrari really were considering him up until the very last minute, until Kimi Raikkonen just went, "Hey guys, can they come back because I want the more chalk ices." Kimi Raikkonen might not have really had his heart in Formula 1, but hey, he was a world champion. And still to this day, Ferrari's most recent champion. So yes, fate threw Nico a joker on 2 occasions. But you do have to look back and think. In terms of the Mercedes opportunity, was Hamilton the better choice? Oh, absolutely. There is no indication that Nico Hulkenberg would have been better than Lewis Hamilton in the W04 or the W05. Because Hamilton's move there unlocked a huge dynasty, one of the largest in Formula 1 history, and it delivered wins almost immediately once Lewis got on top of the W04, because that car didn't come to him, he came to the car. That being said though, there is a real argument to suggest that Nico Hulkenberg would have delivered more to Ferrari than they got with Kimi Raikkonen. Because come on, Kimi didn't really set the world alight up against Fernando Alonso or Sebastian Vettel, did he? He was a safe pair of hands. He was the safe bet, the reliable one that Ferrari knew inside and out, whilst they themselves were going through a phase where, sure, they did have a competitive car after 2014 and the vacuum cleaner, but in terms of management, it was absolutely ridiculous. And you could also say that Massa and Raikkonen played ball with Alonso and then Vettel. They didn't get in the way. There was no team orders to worry about. There was a clear 1-2 structure. Traditions. And as has become very clear, Ferrari loves their traditions. Had Hulkenberg been next to Alonso, that could have stirred the pot a little bit too uncomfortably, and memories of 2007 McLaren would have still been very fresh in Ferrari's minds. And with Fernando very much that close to leaving the team, and then he ultimately did for McLaren in 2015, the last thing you want to do is bring in a German hotshot who is keen to really make an impression. The only thing that Kimi would be really demanding you for is where the bar is. And the results showed that that decision to bring Kimi back was not the best call in 2014, which does keep the notion alive that a Hulkenberg profile might have been a cleaner fit under the new rules, especially when you look in the standings, and in a Force India no less, the German scored more than Raikkonen, over 40 points more, almost breaching the 100-point barrier. Just 4 shy. Yes, this still remains a bit more of a what-if rather than a definite certainty that Nico would have been better than Kimi, but you would certainly think he would have been a more proactive member and participant, maybe towing along with Fernando Alonso, especially if he sensed that he was eventually going to be leaving, him fed up with Ferrari not providing him a world title after 2 occasions where they looked very, very likely. And also, it might have gotten them that little bit closer to Williams in 3rd place in the Constructors that year, and it might have been some small potatoes considering that Ferrari, the F14T, was abysmal. And then maybe when Sebastian came along, having Nico right there, another German, it might have been absolutely perfect in terms of synergy. It might have been a really, really good, solid lineup. Although you could easily argue that Kimi and Seb were also firm friends and they were certainly not controversial. But sadly though, Hulkenberg's move to a cash-strapped Sauber in 2013, I reckon, before jumping back to Force India again, reduced probably his visibility as the top seats were being decided. And yeah, even Nico called that move to Sauber a misstep. But it's not like the team didn't appreciate his efforts with that P4 in Korea, and his second stint with them? Oh, that's definitely not a misstep, as we have seen. All it took for Sauber to give Nico his first podium was a former Ferrari team boss and the former sporting director of Red Bull Racing, Jonathan Wheatley. Yeah, so arguably you could say that Nico is getting a soupçon of what it's like to be with a front-running team with two hugely influential representatives from those teams back in the day. But I do think that Nico was very much up against it, him being compared to former world champions. That is something I don't think Nico could have easily argued against, despite him being a younger prospect than either of them. And especially in this latest situation, him versus Sergio Perez, Perez not only had quite a few podiums to his name at that point, but then also his cheeky win at Sakhir, and at that point, Nico was solidly a dependable midfield driver, but he had no podiums to his name. Yeah, that recency bias did not help, but also the lack of podiums did not help either. It was all speculative. You could say Helmut had his own spanner then. So yes, Red Bull's snub, once again, denied Nico a turn up at the sharp end. But it's not an isolated event. It's more like the continuation of his story as F1's nearly man. Dr. Marko admitting that he could have been in top positions in their car, Marko did value his consistency. They even liked the personal chemistry he had with Verstappen, as friends. But then came one spectacular win by Perez and the door shut again. Just as with Hamilton, just as with Raikkonen, just as with Lotus, Nico was edged out by a louder moment in someone else's career. It's not like Nico sucks or anything like that. He's an incredibly good driver. Now people saying he's probably one of the best drivers on the grid right now without a win to his name. He's proven time and time again that he does have good one-lap pace, most of the time. He can also adapt really well to strange machinery. I mean, just look what he was able to do at Haas in 2023, providing them a kick up the backside every now and again, saying it was simply not good enough, that car, and then 2024 turned out to be spectacular, then going to Sauber, lifting them up, as we have seen, them now knocking on the door of 5th place in the Constructors. It's amazing, the influence that Nico has with midfield teams. He really deserves a chance with a top team. Even if he is the sidekick, he can at least get a few podiums. But sometimes F1 does not reward quiet praise or virtues or consistency. You need to be a loud figure, and it's quite safe to say that Nico is one of the most harmless characters on the grid. Although, admittedly, we are seeing a lot more of a youthful, cheeky side of Nico now he's partnered up with Gabriele Bortoleto, his first ever Greenhorn rookie teammate. You just feel like Nico is feeding off Gabi's energy, that he's motivated, he's fired up, he enjoys the idea of teaching a young rookie. And look what's happening right now. Nico is a merchant in qualifying, but Gabi is proving to be an even bigger merchant, and he's only going to continue to get better, and Nico probably will remain pretty consistent. I can't really see a drop-off with that guy, because he said many times that he knew he always had it, and after getting that podium, he was like, easy, I knew I had it in me. Yeah, his confidence is only going to grow. Gabi's confidence is only going to continue to grow. And Red Bull could have had that, a really harmless partnership with Max Verstappen, but nevertheless, 3 times during Nico Hulkenberg's F1 career, he's rocked up to a front-running door, knocked on it, they gladly open it and say, "Ah, Nico, good to see you. Oh, Lewis. Oh, Kim. Oh, come on in. Sorry, Nico, can you just get out of the way, please? Oh, no. Let us know how things go." Slam. That's pretty much how it's gone. The Red Bull one just being yet another example of fate dealing him the wrong card. In another timeline, he could have been a world champion. In another, Schumacher could have claimed his 8th. To find out what could have happened in that hypothetical reality, watch this video next, straight after this one.